And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play your first $5 lineup. And we're presented by CLNS Media. Make sure to go subscribe to us on the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. Lots of great content there throughout the offseason. Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs, live streams, these podcasts 6 times a week throughout all, not 6 Bruins Beats, but 6 across the 3 podcasts throughout. And then if you don't like looking at us, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And then obviously there's a lot of great content at Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access on YouTube. So make sure to go subscribe to all that. Turn those notifications on. If you want to leave us a review, it wouldn't be the worst thing. If it was nice, that would make our lives easier, and we would really appreciate it. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. How was your 4th? Are you a big, go somewhere, do something big, or are you more chilling, relaxing?
I try not to go anywhere. I'm not going down the Cape. I'm not getting stuck in that traffic. I feel like you're going up north to Lake at New Hampshire or like up in Maine, you're hitting the same traffic. So I'm like, find a backyard. You hang out with family, friends that are ever in town. Got a little sun, a little bit. So I was able to hang out by a pool, have some dogs, and it all went pretty well. So I can't complain. I like doing something, but I don't like building plans around it. I'm always find the nearest cookout. You just walk the streets, get a little whiff of that burger air. And you got to find the nearest spot to chill.
You just walk into a random backyard. That's how it is in Southie. You just walk the streets, have to dodge the college kids, and then you pick a backyard and you say, "Hello, I am here to have a cheeseburger," and they hand you a cheeseburger, and you're one of the family.
You're golden.
That's how it
goes.
Yes,
exactly. Yep, that's how it works.
That's how Southie works, folks who don't live around.
Don't take don't do that if you guys are here. Please don't do this.
No, you should do that in every town. Every July 4th, you should, in your whatever town you're in, whether it's in Mass, Connecticut, Maine, a different country, a different region.
Yes,
do that. Try it.
Yeah, if you go to like Uzbekistan, if you go to Uzbekistan on July 4th, like just walk into someone, like same thing. The rules of July 4th carry across borders, Evan. We all know this.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was that was like one of the Borat outtakes, I think.
I believe so.
Movie. So but yeah, I'm with you. I like to relax. I went to the beach a couple times, like didn't do anything crazy, nothing insane. One of my roommates does have a place, or his family has a place in York, Maine, so we went up there for the day. And that's always nice. It's fun. It's near the beach. It wasn't crazy packed. I was kind of surprised, but it was not. It wasn't insane, which I don't mind. I am all for that.
Sounds like a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have when the beach is not completely packed with people. But one thing that we didn't get to touch a ton on, because it ended July 3rd, and then I think people kind of tune out over the weekend, and then you come back on Monday and everybody's back at work, is Bruins Dev Camp was last week. And it got, not that it got like overshadowed, but like free agency sort of takes precedent over it early in the week. And then everybody was still stir crazy off getting James Higgins at 7. Maybe that was just me and you, but I felt like everybody was still kind of in the aftershock of that. But there was Dev Camp, and it wasn't a bad one. I thought there were a lot of things to take away, a lot of things to like. I have been covering Dev Camp since 2018. That was the year they drafted Axel Anderson, Jakob Lauko. I think Curtis Hall was that draft. Do you remember what your first Dev Camp was?
I think it was probably around the same time. Like I started covering them full time before the 18-19 season. Like maybe I would cover periodically when I was in my Mass Live days way back when, but I think probably 18 was maybe my first Dev Camp. We probably didn't even know each other. I probably didn't even know how to get up to the press box. I was probably just roaming around, was eating a pizza in the stands. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. So that's probably where I was.
The irony is you fight so hard to get up to the press box, and then for Dev Camp, I'm like, I want to go stand in the stands. I want to go sit. Yeah. I want to go ice level. I want to see this from right in person. But yeah, I mean, I think back over the last 2018 Dev Camp, is that like 7 Dev Camps, 8 Dev Camps since then? I don't know if there was one in 2020. I don't think there was because of COVID. So whatever. But the last bunch of Dev Camps, this had the most upside by a long shot. This is not close in terms of upside and guys you could look at. I talked about this with Court Lalonde on Friday of like, ooh, he could be a player. He
Mhm.
could be something. I'm curious, like what aside from Hagens, even what was sort of like your big overarching takeaway from this dev
Y-
camp?
Yeah, I agree. Like, obviously, a lot of the headlines start with someone like James Higgins, and I thought he looked very legit in terms of playing to his strengths. But to your point, like the success of like the Bruins starting this new contention window, this, building this new core up doesn't just rest solely on James Higgins. You need, I'm not saying all these guys are going to hit. I think it was Jay Fresh on Twitter had like a video someone posted of like, I think it was like Montreal's dev camp where it was a guy had like a pretty good dangle, scored a goal. People were like, unreal value for a third rounder.
I think it
And
was
like
LJ
Jay,
Mooney, wasn't it?
yeah, and Jay Fresh was like every dev camp tweet because like anyone does anything and they get it on video, everyone's like, this kid's gotta call him up right now, baby.
Yep.
Like, so not to get too carried away or saying that all these guys are gonna hit, but I think you look at as the Bruins are trying to build up their, especially their prospect pool. There's a lot of players that are a couple years away, but you like what they showcased, right? In terms of not just like saying that every single one of these guys that even makes it to the NHL are going to be stars, but whether it's Zellers, who has been as advertised in terms of great shot, really, does a little bit of everything in the offensive zone. Looks like a player that could be a middle six regular down the road, right? And I think we were all impressed with his game. Even like Simpson, the third round pick, who's kind of like a replica of Will Zellers, right? Like offense first winger is going to have pretty much the same path, except he's going to be a year behind him. He's going to go to the USHL, then go to North Dakota. I was impressed with his game. There's projects like Vashik Blanar, who plays defense like if you do like a be a pro in NHL, you're like, I'm going to be the next Bobby Orr. And like, I'm going to just jump up onto the play every single time. That's kind of what he does. It is chaotic. It is not sustainable in terms of playing that way in the pros, but you like the tools, you like his ability, you like what he could be in a couple of years if they round out his overall game. Just what a player that's 6'4" with that offensive creativity could do. And I can go down like the list of some of these players that you like what some of their skill level is and what their skill set is and how it can translate moving forward. Even someone like Dean Letourneau, who I looked at, I think a quiet first couple of days, but once you get to like the battle drills and the scrimmage on Thursday, um, this is a guy that when he was drafted, people were comparing him to Tage Thompson. I think we can probably stop that comparison. But I looked at like a guy with his hands, with his like creativity, in grade A ice, and you match that with like the physicality that he was throwing around. I'm not saying he's going to be Tanner Chanot or he's going to be throwing his weight around like a power forward per se. But I think when you look at that frame and if he builds it out and he continues just to add on some muscle, like I know this will get countered by people saying that, oh, like he's a first round pick. You don't want him to be a bottom six guy. But if he ends up being like Brian Boyle and is like a great matchup nightmare in his prime in the bottom six and can do a little bit of everything and can help your team in terms of whether it's a 4C, whether it's a third line role, you can pencil Dean Letourneau in for the next 5+ years. And that stability that would bring, you like that. So I think up and down the list, there's a lot of players that they've added over the last year or so that going to take some time. You're going to have to kind of mold them into what you want them to be, but you like the skill and you like the upside, I think, which is the first time it's been the case for the Bruins in a long time in terms of like there's projects, but there's upside. Whereas a lot of the times the last couple of years, it's been high floor, low ceiling, and you kind of know what you're getting out of that player, like right when you watch them in dev camp. Like, oh, this guy, could be something, or maybe he's going to be a really good AHLer. This guy is who I think could be in the NHL if they develop in time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we were saying this like for years. It was sort of like you'd pick a prospect or two from Bruins Dev Camp and be like, oh, he'll be a good third line right wing, or he'll be a good stalwart on the fourth line. And it was devoid of top end guys. And I think that was the big difference this year. Was you mentioned it right there, high end guys, uh, high ceiling guys, projects, taking swings at guys, and that was their whole point of this draft. And you mentioned Blanar, like he was in the scrimmage, was fantastic, and was up in the play, and basically a forward out there, and confident with the puck. And Cooper Simpson, who played the majority of this past year against kids his own age and younger in Minnesota high school hockey, a lot of times those kids would come into a pro dev camp and be like, oh, damn, these kids have played a lot better guys than I have and blah, blah, blah. And no, he played the same way, patient with the puck and wasn't afraid to dangle guys and cut to the middle and get to high danger ice. And it's like, those are the kind of habits you want to see in a forward. And those are translatable. And Zellers. Letourneau to me, though, was the big one, especially in that scrimmage. And as you said, in the battle drills, where it's like, all right, he's using his size more, little heavier, going up against like Kostadinsky and winning those physical matchups and getting to rebounds and pucks around the net because he's able to box guys out and like still having good hands and a nice shot and all those different things where it's like, ooh, if that ever hits. And, there was obviously a lot of pessimism around him coming out of BC this year. But as you said, if you can get him to be a top 9 guy in the NHL, that changes their entire center depth chart. I mean, their center depth chart has been greatly improved, in the organization a lot through this draft. Will Moore, James Hagens, and that's nice and that's big. And Lachlan Mellis breaking out has been another huge addition to that. But if Letourneau can figure it out this year and play to that level in Division I as a sophomore, BC, and you start to see those incremental growths that we saw at Dev Camp, like that changes a lot of things. That changes quite a bit about this team, and I think where they're headed down the middle.
Yeah, it's almost like, again, I don't view like Letourneau, like if he goes to the NHL, as being like a power forward or like a bruising player, but I think his willingness, I think you saw it during the scrimmage, to engage physically, or at least like battle, I think maybe down low is probably the best way to put it. Because what I noticed, again, I wasn't watching every single BC game, so I mean, why would you? But I think you look at just the limited time I've seen him, you notice him out there, but it was a lot of perimeter, right? Like, and this is a guy who I think was like waiting to, get that goal across the board and kind of get rolling a little bit. Didn't happen for him, but you didn't see him like engaged down low. And so I'm not thinking this guy is going to be bowling over everyone on a shift, but I think that willingness to like throw a reverse hit like he did on Christian Kostadinsky in the scrimmage, to fish out pucks down low, where especially when you have just his size and like the reach, and you see how good his hands are, like just operating more in that area of the ice is going to just lead to more and more chances. It's like how, a guy like Jake DeBrusk isn't the biggest guy, but his willingness to engage down low means he was there for a lot of tips, rebounds, all that kind of stuff. If Letourneau can play that style of game of just operating down that area, you're going to see the production tick up, I think, for him. Whether it is the greasy goals or if he's fishing out a puck behind the net, wins a puck battle, boxes out a guy, and just has that reach and those hands to get to the front of the net and make something happen. Like, that's how I think he's going to generate his offense. He's not this guy that I think is going to be cashing in on chances off the rush or anything like that. Like, he's definitely a very unique player in terms of the skill blended in with his size, but it's almost like you get to play to your strengths with your frame first, and then you let the skill take over once you recover that puck. And I think he was always going to be this guy that's going to take a couple years to figure that out. But I think you saw it gel a little bit during that scrimmage that, hey, if I play that way in college against, tougher competition, but as I build up that weight, I can win a few more of those puck battles. I can go in, retrieve pucks. And I think that's what he needs to do to kind of get on a roll here. And to see that again in a scrimmage, it's Dev Camp, but I think that's encouraging. If that's what his next step has to be as he tries to at least be a viable NHLer. And I think that's what he has to do to stick.
Yeah, and we were talking about this on Thursday watching the scrimmage. Like, I think this past draft took a lot of pressure off him, where he's no longer like, you got to be the number one center. You've got to be the savior of this franchise. It's like, nah, man, like, hopefully you pan out. If you're the Bruins, we hope that you can be in our top 9 someday, but it doesn't have to happen. There's not as much pressure as there was 2 weeks ago on him. So I think that's certainly a good thing. And I think my other big takeaway from Dev Camp, and I was kind of touching on this with Court Lalonde on Friday, was, the Bruins have their current core of guys like Pastrnak, McAvoy, Swayman, the Lindholms, Zadorov is in there now. Morgan Geekie is now signed long-term. You have that group, and we all agree they're of contending age. They want to win now. I understand that. But when I see a dev camp like that, where you've got Haggs and you've got Zellers and you've got Will Moore and you've got, Letourneau and you have all, Blanar and these other prospects coming down the line, even Chris Pelosi I add in there too. Like,
Right.
maybe that's the supplement to that core. Like, maybe that's the crew that when they finally start hitting NHL readiness next year and beyond, they're supplementing the core at the NHL level. And over the next 3 to 5 years, they're turning back into a contender with guys they're drafting. And you have next year's draft where you have 2 first-round picks. You have 2 first-round picks in 2027 as well. And whether or not they keep those, we'll see. But like, I think what's going to supplement this core and keep this team sort of continuously in the mix and then fully contending is going to be this group of prospects that they're going to add on to in future seasons. I think that was probably my biggest takeaway from Dev Camp.
Yeah, I mean, again, to what we said before, where you're not expecting all these players to hit, but also, there's 12 forward spots in a lineup. Like, if one or two of these guys slots into bottom 6 roles, like that takes a burden off of both the team in terms of finding that talent, but also like financially. If all of a sudden, like, you got 2 years down the road and James Haggs is a top 6 center and Dean Letourneau's fighting for a spot, or Fraser Minton's on a rookie deal and he's at your 3C for the next couple of years. If you're middle 6, right? Yeah. You hope by 2 years from now they've signed maybe a little bit more of a high impact player that is costing some of that money. But if you can offset that with, a guy like Morgan Geekie, whose deal could age well if he lives up to what this past season was. But then you add in, like, what if one of Chris Pelosi sticks or D'Angelo Schmellis or someone, right? Well, I'm not saying like we can look into the crystal ball in 27, 28. It's like, oh, we got Pelosi and Schmellis and Letourneau. And like their whole middle 6 is not going to be homegrown guys. That's not what's going to happen.
I was debating getting everybody riled up by tweeting like a 2027,
Right.
2028, like mock Bruins lineup. Then I was like, I don't want to be held to this.
But even if like, 2 of those forwards that aren't Haggs, right, can fight and earn middle 6 spots, like 2 of the pool of the Zellers or Simpson or Lashmelis, Minton, how much that just alleviates the roster battle with the Bruins, right, in terms of figuring out where those pieces are, and also just the financial part of it. Of that's what you need to have. Like, as much as people look at, let's say, Florida, right, of what makes them so great. Yeah, of course it's the stars. It's the guys that are high draft picks or great trades like Barkov and, Bennett and Kachuk and all these types of players. But like, how much does it complete the puzzle when you've got like Losterainen or Lundell, who is the 15th overall pick, or, all these players that fit in here and there that aren't taxing your cap situation while also pulling on the rope. Like, if you're able to have just 2 or 3 of these guys hit and fill out into these roles, it changes the entire outlook of where your team is. Because you already got a top 5 winger. You've got a couple of defensemen who are, really accomplished and esteemed. You've got a goalie who, if he bounces back, is on a deal that, keeps him here long-term and whose deal could age well if Thatcher Demko's getting $8.5 million. Like, who knows what the next kind of contracts are going to be. So you've got foundational pieces in place. If you're able to just plug in some of those spots with some internal talent, you're right. It changes the entire complexion of where this team is and how sustainable whatever their new contention window could be in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it opens up a number of opportunities in your middle 6, as you said. And then also, like, who are they drafting on D? Like, we talk about Blanar, but that's a long time away. Like, can Grenwald step in? Can some of your guys that you've drafted back there start to help? Because that is a strength of this current Bruins team, as is. I want to get into next season. More importantly, next draft, the 2026 NHL draft. I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to get ahead of things a bit. But first, our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So if you go on vacation this summer, there's a good chance you can still get active over there on Prize Picks. The app is super easy to use to create a lineup. All you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your money. And again, PrizePicks is convenient because they offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. And this is coming out on Tuesday, likely. So it's Taco Tuesday. Get over there. This week, the Red Sox are playing the Rockies, who stink.
Yikes.
Are not good. It's a big week for offense. Trevor Story, I like more for whatever his hitter fantasy score is. Abe Toro has been on a tear, more than 0.5 hits. Roman Anthony, more than 0.5 hits, runs, RBI. I love the hits, runs, RBI because even if he doesn't get a hit and he walks and he scores, that's a run. So go do that. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Run your game over at PrizePicks. So, Connor, we're going to break
Evan,
down.
I was going to say that I think legitimately you could hit a ball into like the cask and flagon if the Rockies were pitching to you. So
I will say this. When have the Rockies ever had like good pitching? Ever? Like
never.
In my lifetime, I can't remember the last. Like Jeff Francis.
I was going to say
Jimenez had that one good
07 Jeff Francis was like sort of okay that year. He had like a 4.11 ERA and people were like, this guy's nails and cores. And then like it gave up like a leadoff home run to Dustin Pedroia in game 1 of the World Series, and that was it.
His career was toast. Yeah. They can't because it's the thin air out there. So they can't, like, pitchers don't want to pitch out in Colorado. So they've always dealt with that. But I mean, Jeff Francis, Ubaldo Jimenez had one good season there. So maybe we'll do Rockies Beat. We'll do like a whole Colorado Rockies podcast if we really want.
The offseason's kind of over for the Bruins, so we might as well.
Well, we're going to get into this 2026 NHL mock draft. We're going to break down every prospect. We're going to break down tape. I've got all the film right here. We're going to dissect it. You don't have your whiteboard. Maybe you have like a telestrator.
I'll just draw on my hat. That'll be my whiteboard.
There you go. I'll draw on like a piece of paper. I'm kidding, of course. We're not going to sit here and break down prospects. But The Athletic came out, Corey Pronman came out with a 2026 NHL mock draft, a way too early projection. So we're not going to dive into the prospects because, again, Bruins are picking Mathis Preston, a right wing from Spokane in the WHL. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not going to get into like prospects and things like that, but they're here at number 7 in this draft. Now, Corey used betting odds to predict sort of the draft order. He has, San Jose at 1, Chicago at 2, Anaheim 3, Seattle at 4, Pittsburgh 5, Buffalo 6, Bruins at 7, and then Montreal at 8. Do you see, like, I was trying to think, like, could the Bruins be a lottery team again? I want to say no. Like, I don't think they will be. I think realistically they won't be. I think they are more picking like 14th or 15th. I think they're in the mix. I don't think they make the playoffs. But like 7 stuff has to go wrong. There have to be injuries. These problems have to be really bad, I think, to be back at number 7 again.
Yeah, I mean, can they be a lottery team? I think absolutely.
Yes, they could. Yes, I'm saying realistically. Like, if everything we've been saying, like your core does better than they did last year, which should be possible, you shouldn't be picking 7th again or 5th. 5th. It was really, they were 5th worst. But
I mean,
what do you think?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility they could be a lottery team, just because, like, I think even with the defense stabilizing and Jeremy Swayman getting back into order, like, that offense still has so many question marks and so much that, like, needs to go right for them to be a pedestrian offensive grouping. Like, you need David Pastrnak to stay healthy, which is the most important thing, right? But I think even once we, like, maybe let's not factor in, like, freak injuries. If McAvoy's hurt, Pastrnak, yeah, like, no shit, they're going to be a lottery team. But I even think, like, you're still resting a lot of your hopes based on guys you brought in on Victor Arvidsson, who had the worst year of his career with the most cheat codey offensive grouping in the NHL, right? Like,
isn't that incredible?
You've got that. You've got Casey Middlestat, which could be a 40, 50-point guy, or What, like, you got that, right? I mean,
We gotta isolate that sound like a.
you've got Morgan Geeky, who, again, like, I'm mapping up all these things where we're projecting them, I think, to take a step forward, or at least maybe be what they were last year. But I think you could just as easily see it not happening, right? Like Morgan Geeky, I think the Bruins are hoping he's a 25, 35 goal scorer. But, like, it's also not out of the realm possibility, right, that shooting percentage regresses and just some of the goals just aren't going in. Maybe he's still like a 22 goal scorer, but still a big drop off from what last year was, right? Like, how much are you expecting the way that the Lindholm, Pasternak, Geeky line, what they did at the end of last year, will carry over? It could. It just as easily could not, right? Like, so I think you then look at, like, whatever your third line is, like Tanner Jeannot, like Blumel, like one of those guys, right? Like, you've got a lot up in the air that I don't know how much assured production you got out of this group. And if it's, again, tough sledding with that, the way that is, and you can't score, I could easily see them being like a lottery team. Like, I'm almost going in now with the expectations of maybe they can be a competitive team down the end of the stretch of the season, especially if they give some of these younger players some run. But that offense, like, there's a lot of teams that are really bad in the NHL that have much better offense than them. Like, I looked at what you said with the projections, like Anaheim. I think Anaheim on paper might be a better team than the Bruins.
They've been rebuilding for years. They should be. When is that? Like
Montreal,
I always wonder, when's
Montreal
that gonna hit?
has Montreal has so much more skill than the Bruins right
I
now
don't
on their
understand why
roster.
Montreal is at 8. And this isn't Corey Pronman. He just did betting odds, but I don't
Yeah,
understand why Montreal would be at 8.
Buffalo is the most cursed team in the NHL, and, like, they've got more offensive upside with their personnel. Not saying it's going to happen,
Completely. I agree.
like, the Red Wings have the most pedestrian B non-rope pulling ass forward group in the league that Steve Yzerman has done, because he apparently can't build a roster anymore. They got more assured production out of, like, guys who have been not good for years, like Andrew Kopp and all those players, than, like, what the Bruins have beyond Pasternak and maybe Geeky, right? Like, I could
Yeah.
easily see them being a lottery team.
No, I could too. I'm just saying, like, with that core, and I'm not saying that they're phenomenal, because again, we're talking about, are you a lottery team or not? We're not talking like cup contention or things like that. You're paying Swayman a ton of money. He should be better. Like, Hampus Lindholm's coming back from injury. You hope he's around the same, but he should be better. Charlie McAvoy should be better. Like, even if they're better, 7 was really 5, because 7 was where they landed in the lottery, but they were the 5th worst team in the NHL. So, like, 5 was sort of worst case scenario. I don't see them at 5. But, like, could I see them at 9 or 10? Absolutely, yes. I could. But I like they could be. They could be a lottery team. I keep going back to, like, their core should be better. Their core, those guys, I'm not saying that they're great. A lot of people are getting very angry at me right now listening to this. But they shouldn't be this bad. Is my point.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. They can be. They showed it this past year. Elias Lindholm could be a 3C. Like, that's what he could. Like, people are like, oh, he had a good end of the season and he had a good, Worlds right after. And that's all true. He also could stink. Like, I completely agree. But your defense, your goaltending should be better this year. And maybe that just means less lopsided losses, but not less actual losses. I still don't. If I was picking, I'm saying they're like the 12th or 11th pick. They're somewhere in that, like, 10 to 14, 15 range. Most likely. But could they be could they be, like, in the top 10? Yes, they could be. I think they absolutely could be. And again, it speaks to, I think a lot of people, as the dust settled on free agency last week, and, like, the Jeannot contract wasn't great. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But the money's not going to kill you. $3.4 million is not going to ruin you. It's just kind of weird, bad use of funds, which isn't great.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at sort of the group that they're a middling team. They're even more than, they're not a great team. They're a team in transition. They're sort of just treading water and not fully sucking to try to plan for that next, like, real core of contention, which I think is going to hit 1 to 3 years from now. Um, and that's tough for fans to hear. It sucks to talk about, but I think that, reading that article and seeing them at 7 or even in that range, like, do I think they're going to be at 7? No, but they could easily be picking there. They could be picking around 7. So, yeah, like, I think we just kind of got to get used to this for a little bit, but I don't know if it's going to be that long. I don't think it's going to be like 4 years, but I think are they cup contenders in 3 years? Maybe if all goes right. Yeah. But you still got to get to that. You still got to go through the next year and potentially the year after, and there'll be bright spots, but it ain't going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. That's at least kind of how I see it right now.
Yeah, I almost feel like this year they've at least better steeled themselves to the fact that like if it goes off the rails, like it's not a shock. I feel like last year was such a disaster on so many fronts that like even they were shell shocked at like just how quickly it unraveled and like what the hell. And like they are very fortunate that out of that misery, plus like the lottery ball's not going their way, that they got James Higgins, like which
Yes.
alleviates some of that. But I almost feel like you look at the moves that they made, and I think some of it factors in of like who was out there, which was not much. But I think also for them, like you see them bringing in like high character guys, what they call it, competitive players. I almost wonder if it's almost like this year for them, it's about ideally, maybe I'm just saying, I'm speaking this into existence as opposed to it being a fact, but we're going to give some of the younger players some run, but we're also going to have these veterans and kind of established players in there just to flush the rot out. Like last year was such a disaster. We want guys that if we're bringing up younger players, we want these players to, be accountable, be a tough out, which like I think when Sweeney mentioned that, I almost feel like it's you can interpret in two ways. Like tough out, like they're going to be just naturally tougher to play against. And if they're good, you don't want to play them because they're going to leave some welts. But also if they are going to suck and they are going to have some tough years, they're going to go down swinging and make it at least a somewhat enjoyable product on the ice. But I almost feel
And
like for
not
them,
and not lose like 7-2. Like
yeah.
I
So,
looked at it
yeah,
that
exactly.
as well.
Like, so I think it's something like that where I think they're more equipped for a lot more scenarios where, to your point, I think they believe they can be competitive. Like, to your point of guys are healthy, that decor has a lot of impact players coming back that are going to be healthy, you hope. Jeremy Swayman, I think you look at his previous 4 years than just one bad year and be like, that's what he is. He should be better. Like maybe they're winning games 2-1 and they're beating the shit out of people in the process. That is a formula for winning for right now. And if you help out some younger guys along the way, maybe you're in a pretty good spot, right? I think that is something that. Oh, did my audio cut out? But
It
you
didn't
hear me
cut
okay?
out, but it got weird for a second there.
I got a spam call in the middle, and my AirPods messed it up. So they're trying to throw me off what my mission statement is for the Bruins, but I'll keep on talking. Uh, I think you look at just what the Bruins did. They believe they can be competitive, and I think that template of what they're trying to do makes a lot of sense. Of 2-1 wins, being competitive, being tough to play against, kind of uh, getting the offense through, just higher shot volume, all that type of stuff. That's what they're hoping for. If it doesn't go that way and the offense really dries up, and maybe some of the younger players that are the next guys knocking on the door, right? The Patras, the Lysells aren't the right guys, and you're waiting for that next group of the Hagens and Zellers, and just it's another kind of lost year. Well, I think they're better equipped for, well, we didn't commit long term arduous money, right? Like Geno's a long term deal, but it's as you said, it's not going to kill you. We have more money freed up next year. We could get a good draft pick out of it, and we kind of stay the course as to what we're doing. Like, I feel like you're leaving both those possibilities open. What's going to end up playing out, I couldn't tell you, but I feel like the Bruins themselves, after how bad last year was, seem to have contingency plans in place. I would say is how they view it for right now.
That's kind of why I think it's somewhere in the middle. They're not going to be horrific. They're not, they're not going to finish as the second or third worst team in the NHL. But I also don't think they're a playoff team. So it's sort of like that middle ground. And some people would argue that's the worst place to be.
Yeah.
And it certainly can be. I don't think it's awful because you do have legit prospects now in your pool. You're going to have more. You're also going to have 2 first-round picks the next 2 years. Again, unless you trade them, but you have 4 firsts in the next 2 drafts. Like, it's not all awful if you are in the middle, if they are relatively competitive and they are, as Sweeney said, a tough out throughout the season, and they finish as the 9th, 10th, 11th worst team in the NHL, and their picks are, in the teens and in the 20s. It's not perfect, but it's also not awful. Like, this isn't a team with no upcoming draft talent where it's like, oh my God, you traded all your draft picks for older veteran guys who stunk. Like, that isn't them right now. So if they are picking 9th next year or 14th or 7th, at least now it's like, all right, they have a plan in place. Like, they expect to be where they are at right now. Whereas last year it was like, holy crap, pull
What
the
the
fire
hell?
alarm. Like, this is crazy. Crazy. Something that's never crazy,
What's
and
that?
actually sometimes can be crazy. Bruins Ringside, our stuff here. Make sure to subscribe to us. Bruins Ringside on YouTube. As I said, Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs throughout the offseason, throughout the regular season. We got some live streams that we're going to do. Carl will come on and do the whiteboard and everything, get you guys all riled up. And then make sure to subscribe, comment, like, turn notifications. And then, of course, if you don't like looking at us, you're like, I don't want to see them at all. So that was almost my Bane impression with the hands over my face.
Yes.
But if you don't like seeing us, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. In terms of prospects for next year, though, we're not going to like dive too deep on this. You made me privy to this because I hadn't looked at mock drafts too much, but like even just looking at this one that Corey Pronman did, and then I know like Flow Hockey's done one, The Athletic did one back in the spring. Top 10 picks, very heavy on wingers. There's a lot of wingers here. Gavin McKenna's the consensus one. He's a left winger. The guy they have going second's a left winger. Then they have a right shot defenseman, left winger. They do have a center at 5. Another right
You
winger.
boy.
That's right. Tynan Lawrence, baby. A right winger at 6, a right winger to the Bruins at 7, a defenseman at 8, a defenseman at 9, and a defenseman at 10. So if you are in this top 10 as of now, and this is very likely to change, very, very, very
Right.
likely to change. If you're in that top 10 next year in 2026, you should get a winger, which is what you need, or a defenseman, which is what your prospect pool really needs. So it's kind of interesting how like this draft, they really needed a center. They get James Haggs in that top 10. It's a center heavy top 10. And then if they are in the top 10 next year, at least as of now, it looks pretty heavy on wings. You do need wings, pretty heavy on D. You do need D. I don't know. Feels like the dominoes just from the outside could be kind of falling your way.
Yeah, and a lot can change, right? Obviously, what
Yeah,
the
this is
draft
a
ranking
year
does stuff.
out. It's
But
we're not going to do a lot of 2026 NHL draft talk.
yes,
I promise. Just because the draft just happened.
maybe in like November if the team's off to a bad start. But no, I also think you look at the consensus on 26 is obviously everyone looks at McKenna, obviously, and that would be a good development for the Bruins, and if they were able to get a guy of that talent. But to your point, I feel like 26 is regarded as definitely a deeper draft than 25. There's a lot of wings, a lot of like power forward types. I think like 2 out of the top like 6 or 7 guys projected in a lot of drafts are. There's that, I think Rusbeck, I believe his name is. He's like 6'3", and there's another guy who's like 6'5", like big power forward type players. You've got a lot of Swedes who have a lot of high upside. Ivar Stenberg's a guy that I've heard of for a couple of years who's been lighting it up. I think he's playing in the SHL as a teenager.
He is.
He's got a
From
lot of
London.
talent. You've got a couple of minutes eating big body defensemen. Like whoever it is, you're going to, I think, have a guy. If you are a top 10 pick worthy team like the Bruins are, I think you're going to get a good piece. So we'll see how the Bruins do. But if things do go awry, you're probably getting a foundational talent coming in here. You hope it's McKenna, if that's the case. But if it's not, if it's Rusbeck, if it's Stenberg, if it's any one of these players that we've mentioned, you're getting a guy that's going to be a foundational, I think, asset for this team looking a few years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they have Pronman has the Bruins picking again at 21 and taking a winger from Sweden. So yeah, I mean, again, it should help you. That's definitely what you need now is wings or D. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I guess if the Bruins stink in November, we'll be like, Gavin McKenna, can you please come on our podcast?
Yes, exactly.
Would you mind telling us what you think of Boston? So we'll see what happens. we'll see what happens. But I think I'm curious to hear what fans think. Tweet at us, comment. Do you want the Bruins to be a lottery team next year? And the easy answer is like, of course you don't. You want to be good. But I think a lot of fans are educated or smart people and understand like, oh, lottery would mean a very high pick. Like, would you guys be okay with that? If the Bruins were the 7th pick again, or they picked 5th, or they picked even 10th, would people be okay with that? Like, and think hard about it. Cause like, it's easy to say that and then go through the season and it's December and you're like,
holy hell,
this sucks. So think about it. I'm curious what people think about that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can follow me over at theglobeandboston.com. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins offseason going into the 25-26 season. Got a couple of features we're working on. A few they're going to drop this week that we're excited to share. And again, even through the dog days of the summer in August, we'll still have you covered every step of the way throughout this Bruins year. So please follow along over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. And you have a pretty big Q&A coming out, right?
I do, yes, with Evan Marinofsky. No, I'm just kidding. But we do have a story coming out soon that I'm very excited to share. So I'm sure we'll talk about that on the next episode later on this week.
I was going to say, I think that's going to probably take a whole episode or a couple at least that will break down from that. So people can go look forward to that. I'm not going to say who it is. Not me. It unfortunately was not me.
It's not Gavin McKenna.
It's not Gavin McKenna either. But it's someone that we'll definitely get a lot of use out of throughout the summer. That is Bruins Beat. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.